Good morning to all. Hello, and thank you for joining the One Ohio Recovery Foundation Board of Directors meeting for the month of May. I would like to ask our newest member of the staff, Lori Cockrell, to please do the roll call of those in attendance today.
Director Bond.
Here.
Director Amen.
Here.
Director Whiston. Director Handrew. Director Old.
Here.
Director Mason.
Here.
Director Mayer.
Here.
Director Miller.
Here.
Director Luce.
Here.
Director St. John.
Here.
Director Worsbicky.
Here.
Director Dodge. Director Drehos.
Here.
Director Hohato.
Here.
Director Tyler Lee. Director Mattia. Director Piccirilli. Director Greta Johnson. Director Silac. Director Gerwa.
Here.
Director Kidd.
Here.
Director Portman.
Here.
Director Radcliffe.
Here.
Director Roizen.
Here.
Director Smitherman. Director Baker. Director Kleemeyer.
Here.
Director Terry Johnson.
Here.
Director Phil Plumer.
Here. Very well. Thank you, Lori. We have a quorum. Now that that is officially out of the way, we can begin our meeting. So today, according to our code of regulations, this is our annual meeting. Just 2 years ago, several of you and many of us, we all met for the first time. You know, as we sit around this room, we recognize each other now, but that first meeting, that wasn't necessarily the case. We've accomplished a lot, and there's obviously an awful lot in front of us. Also, it's important to recognize that May is Mental Health Month, a nationally recognized observance that highlights that each of us must work to support mental health. No matter the age, we all have many life experiences and situations that impact mental health. So talking about mental health can help us all feel more comfortable when asking for support. This month and every month, mental health is important. Let's be sure that we are the carriers of the message and we can decrease the stigma around these conditions. Now, lastly, before we start on our agenda today, I'd like to welcome a new member to our board of directors. That is Senator Terry Johnson. Would you like to introduce yourself and say a few words?
Thanks, sir. Hi, everybody. I just did something I never do. I always say howdy. Howdy. I'm going in for Rob McCauley here. He did a great job. Rob's a fantastic person, and it's actually a loss to your organization, so I'll strive hard to fill his shoes. I'm from Southern Ohio. My district's 14. It goes from Scioto County through Adams County, through Brown County, through all of Claremont County. I've got a little bit of Cincinnati in that district. My beginning in politics was actually as county coroner in Scioto County, 2002 to 2008. 2010. And during that period of time, I documented what was happening to our folks and identified what was actually killing people, prescription cocktails. Became a state rep in 2011, and Dave Burke and I authored House Bill 93, which closed the pill mills, which were the industrialized addictors of our patients. Then went to the Senate. And have been in the Senate for 4 years, 1 year appointed, and 3 years elected. Up again for election again, so politicians, policymakers, it's all one thing. You know, we try to separate that, but that's the way it is. So here I am, and I'm happy to listen and to learn and contribute as much as I possibly can. Looking forward to getting to know everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doctor. And we want to thank all of our guests who are here with us today or who are joining us virtually. Again, we cannot hear your comments if you're joining us virtually there. And feedback during the meeting to the foundation can be through info@oneohiofoundation.com. Again, that's info@oneohiofoundation.com. Now, we have a lot to cover today, but each of you should have received your board packet and agenda. So your first official order of business then would be to adopt today's agenda unless we have proposed edits. Can I have a motion?
Second,
And was that Bambi who made the motion or? Okay, pardon me, Director Portman. And the second was by
Judy Dodge, District
Judy.
J.
And thank you, Judy. And I might note there will be no report from the legal ad hoc working group. That's actually one of the last items on the agenda. They won't be reporting. So all in favor adopting the agenda with that caveat, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and the motion carries. Now we have before us then the minutes to the prior meeting. I'm hoping people have had a chance to go through and take a look at it. And if there are any edits, please let us know. Otherwise, is there a motion to approve the agenda? Excuse me, the minutes
Second.
by Julie, and I believe the second was that by Larry. You're hiding there, Larry. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, and the motion carries. As we have done in past meetings, it's important to start by taking a few minutes to remember why we are all here, why we're working. But today being our annual meeting, I'm grateful that we have a board member to share his journey. With that, I'll look to Director Ted St. John of Region 13. Thank you, Ted.
Hi, my name is Ted St. John. I'm with Region 13, as he mentioned, which is Ashtabula, Geauga, Lake, and Portage. I'm the chief executive for Hopetown, Ohio, which is a 501c3 nonprofit. And we serve adults with addiction. It's more of an ecosystem. Housing, employment, and transportation and recovery supports. I'm also a person with lived experience in long-term recovery. 2/20/09, I made a decision. And that decision came after 27 years of active addiction, progressive. At first for me, it started out as fun. Then it became a habit, and then it became necessary. And when it became necessary, I felt that shame and that trap. And I lived in that for years. And it was a secret. At least I thought it was, or I tried to keep it that way as to the extent of what was happening with me. And I get involved in a lot of conversations, right? And I hear, things like we grew up with, which is, well, weed is the gateway drug, well, so is nicotine. And so is trauma. And trauma is a life-changing event, right? That's all it is. It's just a life-changing event. It could be different for anyone. We've all had different levels of trauma based upon a person's resilience, which the type of trauma I had, I wasn't very resilient to, and it was a solution for me. Using was a solution for me. It worked, but it has consequences. And, I'm not a person who gets involved with conversations about, is it a disease? Is it a choice? It doesn't matter to me. The fact is, once I lost my choice, regardless of how it happened or whose fault it was, it's still my responsibility because it's treatable. Addiction is treatable. But it takes the right conditions, and it takes the right supports, and it takes the right timing. But ultimately, it takes for me to make that decision. On 2/20/09, I made that decision. I come from a series of St. John men who had mental health and addiction, and they split. And my goal was to break the cycle. I became the cycle. I had an episode, an experience. I've been sitting on Region 13 for the last year and a half, being part of this monthly process. And I was honored to be asked to be part of this. But when I was invited to become a state board or a foundation board director, and I walked in the front of this building, I had an experience because from '03, the first time I tried an Oxycontin, to '09, without a day in between, other than some periods of Suboxone and methadone to bridge the gaps, I was a slave to that drug. And it took everything from me. So for this guy from Portage County to be walking into this building across the street from that house to be part of the distribution of the opioid settlement funds, this couldn't hit me deeper than that. I didn't expect it to hit me that deeply. What I can say is I am honored. And I'm proud to be a person with addiction. I'm proud to be a person with recovery. I like to be able to share my story because I know the impact that it has, especially on the families, the loved ones of us. Because as much as we like to think that we're unique, the reality is our family suffered worse than we did because they didn't get to buffer it. They didn't get to use. They just had to suffer and they had no control of it. Ultimately, again, it doesn't matter how we got here. The fact is, it's my responsibility and it's our responsibility as a person with addiction to treat it. And so I do that daily to the best of my ability. And so far it's worked because I never had any periods of abstinence from 12 to 39. I'm getting ready to turn 55. Other than I remembered I was in basic training in the Air Force. I was abstinent during that period. Other than that, I never knew how to live without this. And it might be hard to understand, but it doesn't matter. We don't need to understand it. We just need to support it. And that's what we're doing here. And I'm really excited about the timing of this. I'm really honored to be part of this team and to get to meet you folks and just to participate in the solution because it's humiliating and painful to be stuck in the problem when it repeats every single day. Not today. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Ted. I admire you for your strength and thank you for sharing with us. So now we turn to our committee reports and we'll report individually. The first committee report is the executive committee report. We still have a few updates from our continued work that we have discussed at previous meetings. First, our board secretary, and I was working with Keith earlier today to get his name pronounced right. Hohado, Keith, did I get it right? Okay. Working with Keith to discuss the update on where we are with our board terms, because as you know, the regions were divided into 1 year and 2 year terms. And as a reminder, each of us were assigned a term that was approved by the full board when the foundation was established in order to get our board rolling and to avoid having a turnover all at once. Most of us received 2, however, being the startup nature, some actually received 3, or I should say 3 year terms. With that being said, several of us have terms that are expiring by our June meeting next month. Each of you should have received an email from Lori detailing where you stand with your term. And as a reminder, if your term is set to expire next month, it'll be critical to have your appointing authority reappoint you and share the meeting minutes, resolution, or letter with the foundation before the July meeting. And if you remember, and we'll cover this later, July 10th will be our retreat. And by the way, Alicia timed it that way. Originally, we were going to have the board meeting earlier, and she said, well, why have a board meeting earlier when there might be a turnover? Let's do it when we have the new board. And I'm like, well, that really makes good sense, Alicia. so thank you very much. Alicia and Sarah are both here. Should you need anything from the staff to assist you on the matter? I know I got my letter through. our One Ohio email system, and I know a lot of people are not yet on our, what's the name of our board, on board. I encourage you to try to register for on board.
I need a little tutorial for that.
We can do that.
But I would like to also point out that Director Jane Portman has let us know that she's not seeking reappointment. And Jane, would you like to say a few words?
Just thank you. It's been exciting and educational and a great opportunity to get to know all of you. So thank you and carry on. You guys are just getting to the good part. So thanks.
Thank you. And again, as discussed, the executive committee has established our retreat to be Wednesday, July 10th. This will be a change of the time from the normal July board meeting. So it'll be at 9 a.m. Your calendar should reflect the change of the start time. We're reserving the entire day for that important work, and we hope that many of you, as many as possible, can be present, but we'll also make the arrangements for it being virtual. So, and you want to share the venue that we're going to be using for that?
Certainly, we'll get more details out as they become available. We will likely have our retreat at the State Library, which is located on First Street, right down the street from here. If you take 4th Street right up about a mile, you would run into First. And so we're excited that the library is partnering with us to make that space available for free. So that's always a good.
Three is my favorite number, and having convenient parking actually fits into it. Somebody told me they tried 3 spots today, so with that. Well, thank you very much, Alicia. So next on our agenda is the nominating committee, and as mentioned,
Chair,
I'm sorry.
Alicia, has anything been done about possible accommodations? Because if you're planning on starting at 9, some of us are 3 hours out. So that's leaving like 5 in the morning.
So we will be reaching out to this group. We hope to have more details on it. We do have a travel policy, so it would be a good idea to take a look at those travel rules. If you're in a scenario that you would have to travel far, there are some accommodations that could be made through that policy, but we're gonna be reaching out with kind of some of those details and try to make it easy for folks to make those accommodations.
And why I had, in a conversation, why I had suggested that most of the other boards that I participate on do that.
Okay.
That's a pretty standard.
Just one little thing of protocol. Don't forget to hit the button so you go green. Go green when you're. I don't know if everybody could hear what you were saying, Glenn, but thank you for bringing that up, though. So again, next is our nominating committee. And with that, I'd like to turn over to Tom Gregoire and Evan Claymeyer for their report.
Okay, I'm happy to report I'm green and thank you, Don. Evan and I are our nominating committee. For those of you in the room today, you saw a few emails over the last few weeks inviting you to express an interest, if you had one, in being a member. We offer you the following slate of members that should sound rather familiar. Our recommendation from the nominating committee is our chair as Don Mason, our vice chair as Julie. Julie, where'd you go? I would like to properly pronounce your last name.
Amen, almost like you're praying.
Okay. If you've seen mine, I got a thing about that. So Julie Amen,
That.
our treasurer, Dr. Michael Roizen, and secretary, Keith Hohau. Each of these folks, as you know, has had they've been a longstanding member of the executive committee and put a lot of hours into our success and guided us up and down a few hills as well, too. Each of them would serve as in a 2-year term that expired in May of 2026. So I'd like to open it to Evan, anything to add?
No.
Okay. All right. Evan says no. And let's open the floor and see if there's any interest in having further discussion on the slate. If needed, we can move to executive session. Otherwise, I would need a motion to approve the slate of officers as presented.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Motion by Larry and a second by Matt Olds. And I don't know if we want to do a roll call, we can do a voice vote. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? And the motion carries. Thank you very much to all. I can speak, I say on behalf of those who were elected, we appreciate the opportunity to continue to serve. So the next item I have on the agenda then is the Grants Oversight Committee, once again. Director Redlaw.
Thank you. I'm still green. So we met, as you know, we're meeting a couple times a month and we meet always before this meeting. I want to thank first the board members for their contributions over the last couple of years. And everything's been exciting, but we're a particularly exciting phase. As we said this morning, there's no actual finish line in this work, but we've hit a really cool milestone and in that our application period is closed for the first time. And so I'm going to throw it to Alicia, who's going to stagger you with numbers.
I think our grants committee this morning was staggered as well. Really appreciate the opportunity. I'm just gonna jump right into it. We had a tremendous turnout from the state of Ohio. We had a total of 1,530 applications submitted over this last month, with our deadline being last Friday, and many that were coming in at 11 o'clock PM that we had the pleasure of assisting. I'm really proud of our team. We worked until that last moment to make sure that everyone had that opportunity to be a part of this, who wants to be a part of this through our grants application process. With that, we wanted to share a few details. And so one of those details is that those 1,500 plus applications represent about 700 or nearly 800 organizations. And so as you may remember, organizations had the opportunity to submit multiple applications, perhaps for different programs. They also could submit applications in a numerous number of regions. And so they have opted to do that. And that was what the difference between that number of organizations and applications received number is. Some just interesting tidbits for that I thought was interesting is about 400, a little more than 400 of those applications are for programs who are asking for less than at 100,000 or less. And that was something that we really wanted to keep in mind to just get a feel for the volume of our grant portfolio that we may expect to see. And so that is a really telling number that we are really getting into those grassroots community groups who are doing great work. And I think we'll be able to support many of them with those numbers. The other interesting tidbit is that a number of these, 48%, of these organizations applied to multi-regions. So again, that is an indicator that we'll have a lot of collaborative work to do with you as a staff team and the regions to make sure that as regions, our regions know what other areas that organization applied so they can use that in the considerations of funding. On the right-hand side is the breakdown of our regional application numbers. We are really excited. Every region has a competitive process. Our lowest number of applicants to one region is 28, and our highest, as you can see, region here, right here in Franklin County, received 196 applications. I know that seems like a lot, and we'll be working with those regions to support the process of how we get through this many. But what I want to point out is down in that bottom corner, there is a asterisk or a couple asterisks around. These numbers will change after the database cleanup. I want to make mention that, yes, we received 1,500 applications, but there are instances in our data, and we've sat with it for about 2 business days now, that we will need to clean up. So for example, an organization may have submitted and made a mistake in their application, and instead of kind of reaching out to say, we want to withdraw that one, they just resubmitted. So there's some of those duplicate entries in that way. The other place where we see, some duplication is perhaps maybe the organization wanted to make sure that they were considered in all categories. So they submitted the same title, amount for the same region, one in prevention, one in recovery supports, one in treatment. So then there's 3 applications for one region. It's really the same application, but they're really trying to delineate that they feel like they fit in all 3 buckets. So that region would only need to review that one application, but it is driving the numbers up. And so there are other scenarios like that. We will have final numbers and we'll be working with the regions, meeting with each of the regions one-on-one to talk through what those final results were, provide a grant summary, talk about multi-regions, talk about what we found in our compliance checks, and we'll be excited to partner with the regions to do that this month.
Michelle, I have a question. I don't need, I can talk loudly. So when you said there's 48% were multi-regions, did the regions get together and collaborate, or were they similar projects that you would consider multi-region?
The regions did not get together and collaborate, but the organizations that are applying are saying that they serve multi-regions. Yeah. Yeah.
In those instances, did they apply in multiple regions, or did they just apply where they're saying, I serve this one, this one, this one? Did they apply the same application to each one of those, which would also drive the numbers up too?
Correct. That is correct. So what we've asked them to do, we have not gotten into the data enough to make sure that this happened, but what we asked them to do is, if an organization is serving more than one region, put an application in for each region you'd like to serve, and they should have adjusted their budget, their outcomes and measures around that region specifically to make sure that they're serving the needs of that region. So that is what we hope to see, and we think that that's what drives that number up to 1,500 as well.
Do you have a sense of whether or not, do you have a sense of whether or not any of those multi-regions apply to every single region to somewhat maybe circumvent this was not a statewide project?
We do believe we have a few organizations who apply to every region. We're confirming that, and whether or not they intended to do that is still yet to be clear, but we do have some confirmed every region organizations that were in the system, which was spelled out in the RFP that we did not want to see that. So there is some work to do there.
Okay.
Yep. One thing we didn't talk about in the grant meeting is, could we let the individual regions know that there's been duplicate applications? For example, somebody might have applied in Cuyahoga County, and then we're surrounded on 4 sides by other regions. It'd be helpful to know whether there's an application for Summit County for the same organization.
Yes. So that is going to be a part of our process. So what we'll do over the next couple of weeks is clean the data up. We're actually reaching out to organizations to just check in and make sure they intended what they put in just asking a few clarifying questions to some of those duplicate issues that we talked about earlier. We're going to clean that up, and we create for each region what's called a grant summary report. That grant summary report will include who all applied for your region, what type of abatement strategy they applied for, and whether or not they applied. Each of those organizations applied to another region. It'll also include, we'll kind of share with that group, but it's not necessarily in the report, any information we found from, let's say, the compliance check, or background check, if you will, for the organization. So that'll be just in this package of information that we'll give to each region.
Are we good or, okay.
Will there be an opportunity for, will there be an opportunity for guess I'm trying to build off that question. So Region 5, I anticipate will have some multi-region applications. Will there be an opportunity for our regional scoring group to have any, is that encouraged or discouraged for us to reach out to Cuyahoga County or Portage County or some other place?
What we have proposed thus far, and I think we're gonna be kind of building this plane as we fly it, is that you all review independently, and if you all decide, yeah, this is a good project, then we could bring the regions together to make sure that you all kind of understand, you know, or even have a conversation about what you all would want to put forth in terms of funding for that particular organization. Maybe it's a big system that covers clearly all the areas. And so that would be something we would convene with you, a conversation around it. We're trying to still work out the mechanics though, because this is a huge percentage of our applications, more than we anticipated. So bear with us a little bit. We're kind of breathing it all in. But I think what we so far have said is that, you know, let the region score it first. If the region wants, if all three regions, for example, in that scenario want to move forward, then we'll convene a conversation. But yeah, this will be a kind of build it as we go process.
We have other questions? And I think one of the insights we had, we're not going to close the grants at 11:59 anymore, so there'll be no more slumber parties watching those grants come in. So,
Lesson learned.
we also wanted to provide you a regional update, which Sarah will give us, right?
The quickest mic. Hello, everyone. Sarah Anstein, Director of Partnership and Outreach. So I have, well, a couple of things. We have held meetings with just about every region to go over the 2 quick guides that we put forth on conflicts of interest and the regional grant review process. So we did those meetings to make sure everyone understood them. They had received them. From there, we requested updated and finalized rosters for the region, both of their full regional board and then their regional grant review committee. Some regions, those are 2 different lists. Some regions, they're the same. Some regions, it's a subset. So we wanted to make sure we had the latest information and contact information for everyone. So the regions are right now finalizing their rosters. We have received them from a number of regions. Once we get your finalized rosters, we then send an email with the link to a Microsoft form, which is where all of the regional board members will complete their related party questionnaire and the attestations. I heard from a regional board member that it took him 4 minutes, so I think it's fairly quick. And we're just telling folks, be thinking about all the groups that you are involved with and associated with, write those down. And then from there, Andy and I will be compiling all of that information to be part of the grant summary report that goes to the region, including essentially a conflicts of interest summary report. So we want to make it really easy for regions to know who's affiliated with what organizations as they start their review and deliberation process. And then the last step is the grant reviewer and power user training. So we will be announcing those dates very soon, and it will be virtual, and they will attend that training, and then they'll get to start reviewing. So that's what's up with the regions. They're doing great. I think they're excited. I'm here to support. So if anyone needs anything, please reach out, and thank you to all of our regional representatives. You've really helped, I think, make this process go really well.
Sarah, are there questions for Sarah?
One question maybe for everybody, whoever. So when we went through our region level of the conflict of interest policy, it really, it kind of knocked us off our game. We had planned on going one way, and now the people who are on our scoring committee, based on 104 applications, are probably all conflicted off of our grant review scoring committee at the local level. So we don't have to have this conversation right now, but if anybody wants to talk to me afterwards or has ideas of how we can get around that, you know, that's kind of our biggest struggle right now, is how do we get non-conflicted people to review the grants before they come to the regional board?
It's a good point. We did, that's identified also and was discussed briefly in the grant committee without solution, but about the need to have a conversation about it. It's a really good point, and I think we need to work with our council as well as we think about doing that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
Can
We
I ask-
also,
Oh, sorry.
go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Procedural question for, I guess, Sarah and Alicia. So as we try to get folks to fill out the conflict of interest information, how do the regions get notified as to how far along we are, who hasn't done it, so that we make sure that everybody fills out the information?
Yes, because we did it in a Microsoft form, it will compile all of it for us really easily in a Excel spreadsheet. So then I will go through on a weekly basis and check off who has done it. Cross-reference that with your roster and then send an email to the regional board leadership to let them know, hey, we're still missing it from these 5 individuals. So we'll be sending regular updates so that we keep that process moving.
Okay, thanks.
Sarah. We also were joined by members of our expert panel this morning, and we appreciated them joining with us. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Alicia, around our expert panel or not?
As it relates to the expert panel, we really talked about the process that they will take. So if you remember, we have those 6 steps of, application through award. The expert panel is step 4. So those applications that you all or the regions approve at the regional level will go to the expert panel, and they're really going to be looking for 2 things. Does it meet an abatement strategy? And is it aligned with evidence? Their process will take them through, and if the answer is yes, those applications continue to move through the process and will be presented in front of you for award. If the answer is no, those applications, if that should arise, and we don't believe that this should happen often, but in the instance that it does, it goes to the Grant Oversight Committee for further conversation. The Grant Oversight Committee will review that, determine their recommendations on moving forward. And if it is still a no after the Grant Oversight Committee reviews it, they will bring it to this full board for further discussion. You all will have the final say on whether or not something is still a no. We still need to work through the processes and operationalizing that, but that is kind of high level what our plan is thus far.
I'm sorry, I just need to circle back on the regional grant committee. We are in the same boat. It feels like everyone is conflicted out. We have some obvious conflicts. Is this a process that will likely happen with every grant cycle? We had determined that this would be our process, whether this was a yearly grant or moving forward. So I guess I'm trying to figure out, there are some people who have applied. So we even bother having them fill out that questionnaire so that they could perhaps participate in the next round of, scoring. I guess I'm not sure, we had established this group. It's very clear that it will not be sufficient to score 60. I think we have 66, which is not 100, so. That is. So I guess I'm just looking for some direction on how to advise our identified grants committee when they're like, well, I'm out. Should I still do this? Because if we don't apply next round, I'm happy to participate next round.
No, it's a good question. And for those of you that are in the virtual room, it's really one of, what advice can we provide and offer as it relates to, and I hear the mic went down, to the group. So I think we will continue to meet with you all region by region. The reasons are very different between the regions of what has, transpired. But what we have pretty much are really kind of talking to folks about is how, to do this, the path forward that really avoids as many perceived or actual conflicts of interest. The actual we have to avoid, but those perceived are the ones that I think are really slowing us up or really causing for more conversation. So if an organization is in a region and they're applying to that region, we really don't want them a part of the scoring process. However, if an organization you're just a volunteer for that organization, or perhaps you just go and help with the syringe exchange program every once in a while. That's a different relationship, and we can work through those conflicts. So I'd say that we could perhaps maybe bring folks together. We do have our regional recap meeting this Friday at noon. This will be a good place to really share kind of what each region is going through and start to continue to have those conversations of how we work it out. I will say, after being on most of those regional meetings, there is just enough difference between each region that there isn't a clear theme for why we're running into issues. But we can continue to try to work those out at that call on Friday. So we'll look forward to that discussion.
Other questions or comments? All right, very good. Well, I started by thanking the board members for their important contributions. I'll conclude by thanking all the staff members for their good work on this as well too. And I will turn it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I just want to say that was such an excellent, robust exchange of thoughts. It's appreciated, I'm sure, by all. So thank you for the update. So next, I'd like to turn to our Audit and Finance Committee report. And with that, we have Evan Kleinmeyer, who is our chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Last month, our committee met to discuss several items that we'd like to share with you today. First, we had a discussion with our auditor, Heather Dolan from the SEO CPA group, and kicked off the process for the 2023 audit. Similar to last year, we plan to take advantage of not only saving our foundation dollars by completing our audit in November to help us avoid the busy tax and audit season happening now. In your board packet is a related party questionnaire that we were just talking about. It is required by both our auditor and our fiscal policy. So we hope each of you will complete it and send it directly to Heather and her team as it indicates on the form. We hope to have all of us complete the form by our next board meeting, which is June 12th. I think Andy has some things to add on the related party questionnaire.
I think that the one thing we wanted to add was that is going directly to the auditor and it's not coming to the board or to the staff. So that was kind of the key point there.
All right. Thank you, Andy. As it relates to our annual meeting today, I'd like to invite Jim up to share the unaudited 2023 financial statement and details with the board.
Just take a few minutes to talk about the unaudited 23 financial statements. Sorry, green now. Okay, the unaudited financial statements. So in your packets, in the board packets, and also in the handouts today, and on the screen for those of you online, are four sets of reports for your consideration. The first set of reports are which ones did we throw up there first? Are the statement of activities, which summarize the revenue and expenditures for the organization for January 1st of 23 to December 31st of 23. As you can see, revenue includes monies received from settlements, interest, and in-kind legal expenses. The expenses are summarized in the statement of functional expenses to the right. Okay, those are the expense categories that the auditor audited us on last year. So those are the ones we use this year, and those expenses then flow over there to where you see management in general on the income, on the statement of activities. The net assets, change in net assets is essentially the difference between the money we bring in and the money we expend. That number was 92 million for 23. Go on to the next slide. There isn't one? Okay. In your handout there is also the statement of financial position, the statement of cash flow. Those two statements are commonly referred to as balance sheet statements. They summarize a snapshot in time, December 31st, the current assets and the current liabilities of the organization. And then what nets out of that is the net assets, which is sometimes referred to as net worth for businesses, of 92.6 million. The cash flow statement summarizes the changes in the cash position during the year. So the change in net assets of 92 million, for those of you who have the full sheet, if you flow down to the statement of activities, were they in different order? No, let's go back. No, that's not it. Yeah. So then the 92 million, which is essentially the net income received for the year, becomes the change in assets on the cash flow. And so the thing to know about financial statements is they all, like all accounting documents, they all tie together. The net assets for the year were 93 million. This is the report that the auditor will audit and present the final findings, I think sometime in the fall. Are there any questions? I know that's fast.
Hearing no questions, another aspect of the important work, Jim, I'll keep you up there. Another aspect of the important work the Audit and Finance Committee is taking on is the role of recommending next year's budget. Last month, Jim began a series of presentations that share the history and critical details of how the foundation funds flow. Today, we will continue our presentation and share details around our settlement activities, estimates for this year, along with other key details. That said, I will turn the floor over to Alicia and Jim to share some details.
All right, I'll start, Jim, and then you can join me up here whenever you're ready. You can go to the next slide. So as Evan mentioned, we are really going to be taking a deep dive into this. We have some important conversations that need to happen this year. I know many of you want to get to that point where we know what we're spending in 2025 and beyond. And to do so, especially with our new members who are joining us every day, every month, we wanted to make sure you guys had some of this background and those details that will help us make an informed decision. We believe in September or August or September. I got the months backwards. So with that said, we really have set forth kind of 3 tracks that will coincide with the Audit and Finance Committee right in the middle. But the first track that we'll continue, the first track that we will start on that we've been talking about a while is just this track around strategy. Who do we want to be as an organization as we continue to develop? How will we make an impact in our state? What information can we use to make those decisions? And that includes listening sessions. That includes listening to people who have been impacted and their families. Really talking to partners, understanding what our relationship will be with the state of Ohio, what our relationship will be with other foundation partners across the state. Those conversations really are going to be critical to understanding what our strategy will be moving forward. And then finally, understanding the data. What does the data tell us are some of the bigger gaps? And maybe that will influence what we decide we want to invest in terms of treatment, prevention, and all the other things that we all know are part of those abatement strategies. So that track will start. We have our board retreat here slated to come up soon. We'll be talking more about that at the June meeting, as well as, of course, in the July meeting to continue down those discussions. The second track is that Audit and Finance with our chair here, Evan Kleymeier, where we will really be looking at the MOU and the fund and really thinking about the funds and doing an assessment of what do we plan to that will be coming in, What do we know about those funds as they come in? What we know about the settlement agreements is that there are some dynamic things that these companies and these organizations can do that would change our projections. And so we want to make sure our Audit and Finance Committee and all of you know what those things are so that we can have a better understanding of this moving forward. We want to also be informed by the lessons we learned for this first grant round. We already know that we won't make the deadline at 11:59 p.m. moving forward, but what are some of those other lessons that we've learned? And that'll be an important piece to kind of how we move forward financially, along with risk assessments, budget assessments, staffing, all of those other things that kind of go into how we create a budget. And then finally, that last track, and our chair talked about it at our last meeting, is the investment committee. We'll speak to that more, but really, what can we do with our funds? How can we invest them? And what is that plan for our short, medium, and long-term strategy? That, you know, what are our options for those plans that will then allow us to kind of really think about all of this to culminate into what the 2025 budget and allocations will be. And so this is just a start or a continuation from last month, but these conversations will be happening in these various committees. If you haven't joined and would like to join any of these committees, please let us know. Let Don know. I'm sure we would be happy to have you in any of those conversations moving forward. So that said, next slide. Just to kind of ground us out, we know that we have that MOU distribution formula. Again, we're talking about the 55% that was in that MOU, and that again is changing and really being impacted by a number of things that we want to bring to your attention. For example, as we talked about in our last meeting, there are options for these organizations for all total 100% of these funds to make payments early. We saw that last month with AmerisourceBergen opting to do a prepayment on year 18. That prepayment for that year was $3.2 million. And we would need to invest that perhaps, if that's a decision that we want to make, to really see that year 18 payment, which was originally slated for 11.4 million. If we really wanted to see that money in year 18, we would have to really think about that prepayment that they've made. So those are some of the examples. They have the opportunity to do that up to 3 times, and we'll keep talking about that. The other thing that changes this whole global formula is the health of those organizations. We've seen many of them start to turn into bankruptcy proceedings. Most recently, Rite Aid, we've seen that with Mallinckrodt, which we already are receiving payments from. So we want to make sure that we continue to educate ourselves, as we are not a party as a foundation to those agreements, but yet a benefactor of those settlement agreements. Educate ourselves and understand these nuances as we move forward. So we're looking forward to really continuing those conversations and making sure that we have that global picture in mind, but focused on our 55%. So with that, here is our current settlement projections. I know Jim will join me now up on the with us to answer any questions about this, but much like the breakdown, this is just the breakdown we shared last month was, here's what that looks like, that Excel spreadsheet of if we got payments on a regular basis through that kind of payment timeline, what that would look like. But this is just another view of that same data. So what we expect is that our longest payment runway is through 2038. But as you can see, many of those the rest of those are much shorter than that time frame. And so we really have to kind of think about when money comes in, and we'll have a robust discussion for you around this as we continue to do research and really understand this with our partners at the Attorney General's office. That really will be dynamic and changing in nature as we've been talking about. So that is just a visual depiction of where we are with our current settlements. And then on the next slide, I believe it talks about some of the future settlements. And so our future settlements that we have been kind of waiting to hear more about are things like Kroger. You may have seen the headlines. They still are kind of pending through a $1.2 billion state and local settlement agreement. This will greatly impact Ohio as Kroger is in our home, is grown here in our state. And so we will likely have the majority of stores, which was one of the settlement bases around how they would pay out. So we're really looking forward to hearing more about how this settlement will take place. Secondly, we have Rite Aid, and they're currently in bankruptcy court. If possible, and if they do get to that point, we would probably see something similar to what we have with Mallinckrodt and bankruptcy settlement funds from them. And then finally, and I know many of us are watching the Purdue Pharma case, it has been put on hold, but has the potential to greatly change our numbers. So really thinking about that 800 million, 858 million estimate can change up or down based off of the way things happen over the next several months in a number of areas. And so we wanted to just bring visibility to that today. We will, over time, keep talking about what those changes are as we know them, but we want to make sure that you guys keep that in mind as we start to think about how we're going to move forward in future years with these funds and really invest or not invest or spend and not spend as we think about our allocation formula. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jim, if you can go to that next slide, to talk a little bit about what he expects for us to receive this year.
Yeah, so this year we're expecting a little bit more than 100 million. The green pie pieces are funds that we've already received and that we know we will receive this year. We'll receive the Janssen, that's been confirmed in June. That's when their regular payments are in June, and the distributor payment will be July 31st. The other payments, we have not had much information on until yesterday. So for the slide, we were estimating hedging a little bit. We might get this in summer or fall, but yesterday the national distributor said those estimates will be coming very, very soon, and that we should expect payments this summer. We will basically said, well, we'll get payments this summer. So potentially by the end of August, we could have roughly 200 million in funds, adding this to our current balances.
And I think that that's important because that will be the probably largest amount we have at one time. And we will really need to, tamper that with expectations of us being around for at least those 18 years that the agreement has been set out. And also think about a funding basis moving forward, which the Audit and Finance Committee will work on.
The settlement agreements with these defendants, did they not specifically call for certain dates that payments would be made?
They did include a schedule, but a number of factors have been weighed in that have adjusted those schedules. When we talk with the Attorney General's office and others, the consent agreement needs to be signed in the county that the suit has settled or processed in. And so in this case, these five organizations just settle officially in Franklin County Court, which then will adjust that timeline slightly for the first year. And then after that, we found that once they get through that first year and that first payment happens, the previous or the following years, they get back on the schedule that is in the agreement documents.
But wasn't this lawsuit settled like 3 years ago? But still needs to be signed, not following that.
One of the things that we want to bring in is perhaps someone from the legal teams that have been a part of this to explain the nuances and details around each of the cases. But the distributor in J&J, Cardinal Health, McKesson cases were settled, but the Teva, Allergan details, CVS, Walgreens, Walmart details were separate. And that would, I would need them here to kind of explain why that happened that way. But we can get back to you on that and bring that to a future meeting.
So in the 107 million, we are expecting what happened last year, which was we got year 1 and 2, and then on the scheduled date, we got year 3. So I'm expecting that we'll get last year's payment, and then they'll get on the scheduled date. Since they've made up the payments have been on time. So I expect an initial payment for the back payment and then the regularly scheduled payment, which for most of these settlements is at the end of July.
Larry Kidd has a question.
So you said there were several that are prepaying, or there were some that have prepaid their obligations. When they do that, are they discounting them?
Yes.
And is that a formula that's been
Yes.
determined? Is it predetermined for?
Yes.
Okay. So it's in the contract, it's in the MOU.
It's not in the MOU, it's in the agreement.
How they will come up with those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
And how many of them have done that already?
just, Centura and Cardinal Health. I did that for year 18. And so we received 3.2 million. In year 18, we would have received from them over. We received 3.2 million last month. Payment year 18 would have been 10.5 million.
Does that mean they're doing it at that's about a 10% discount rate?
Yes, yeah. It is. They're using the interest rates off some schedule the Wall Street Journal puts out.
But it's a higher schedule than we are earning money at.
True, it's tied to interest rates. So since interest rates for the last year have been higher than they've been in a while. The expectation this year was that interest rates were going to be cut once or twice. Well, news, I think this week is interest rates probably won't be cut. They'll probably be increased. Which
Right,
means
but their discount rate is around 10%, so they're doing it as if it's the federal funds rate plus 5% or something.
I'd have to take a look at it and I don't know how they're doing their present value or their discount, but if they're paying, what, 3 years early on the one, was it? How many?
They're paying about 14 years early.
14 years on the Cardinal, you mean? On the Cardinal?
And if you use the rule of 72, they're doing a discount rate of about 10% to get to be able to pay 3.2 million instead of 11 point, whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, there is a documented calculation.
And I think it's just important that we're aware of how this is fluctuating. We've talked with Evan in the Audit and Finance Committee about this because we want to make sure that we understand how this can fluctuate. That could really lead us to how we want to operate moving forward. And how we do our estimations are going to be important around these topics. And we will kind of start to provide those kind of different scenarios to you all, because I think it's an important piece to understand as we make a decision around allocations for next year and well into the future. But that is what we know today.
Alicia, let me make sure I got that right. So are in the settlements agreement, are these discounts built in for early payments?
They can do that. They can exercise it for up to 3 times.
Okay, so the games have just begun. Okay.
To that point, the Audit and Finance Committee are staying abreast of the possible changes, the moving targets of the settlement dollars, and are having discussions as we meet when we'll come to the full board with recommendations to provide what we're all looking for, which is a stable grant allocation budget for our regions with the gamesmanship that can be happening behind the scenes.
Just by a way of education, I think many of you are not only tracking the One Ohio Fund, but also tracking what's going on in your local governments. We did want to make sure that you knew, with all of this going on, Brown Greer has updated their website. And we can make this available to you all to really reflect those payment estimates and what has been received. And so if you go to that website, it shares our information as a foundation to make sure, and you could align it with what we've been presenting here at our financial reports that we'll talk about again later. But also that detail for the local government share and the state share is up there as well. So just FYI that is available. And then the second slide around the same conversation. So the majority of those settlement agreements are under Brown Greer as the administrator. If you wanted to know the full complete picture and the total, the second website you would need to go to, and we'll make this available on our website, is the Mallinckrodt, what's been called as the Note 2, for short, website, who also lists the details and the specifics around how much One Ohio has received, as well as the counties, communities, and cities across the state. So we just wanted to make reference to that, just in case you haven't seen that information. So with that kind of sums us up for this presentation today. I will turn it back over to Evan to close us up.
I just want to thank the staff. Jim and Alicia have been great in helping us try and understand the moving target. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll turn it back over to you.
Well, again, I want to thank Evan, who's a volunteer and volunteering his time while he's actually, your child is now what, about 1 month old?
2.5.
2.5, okay. Congratulations. And again, also want to thank Alicia and Jim for all the work they've been doing and the work the committee's been doing to prepare us for these important discussions. Our next item on the agenda is the Personnel Committee with Julie Amon.
Thank you, Chairman. The Personnel Committee met on May 2nd, and we had both staff members and committee members present. And we're really diving into the personnel handbook at this point and discussed the draft for Section 1 General Employee Guidelines. And we noted where we're incorporating policies that have been created by this board into it. And we will further review and develop the procedures for complaints in that particular section. And we discussed Section 2 as well, which is foundation employment, wage, and hours. And we touched on how to conduct employee training. So those were the two big issues that we worked on during our Personnel Committee meeting. Alicia has diligently worked on this manual, and she's also worked diligently on building the staff that we currently have present. There are no plans at the moment for any more staff. So we're working on the handbook so that our employees that are working have a handbook to follow. Thank you.
Thank you. And any questions for the director? Okay, hearing none, then lastly on our agenda is we have the financial report with Jim Quinn. I'm saying lastly, but that's just next thing on my agenda.
All right, so in your packets, you have the April financial reports. A few things to highlight. As the organization grows, the expenses in April were 95,000. That represents a 20% increase over our prior 3 months. So we have been averaging around 79,000 a month. And that last month we spent 95,000. Year to date, we've spent 315,000, okay, which is 17% of our annual budget. So we're still well under our operating budget for the year. Flipping on to the next. So in the grant world, direct your attention to the grant support budget. So we spent 41,000 as the team rolled out the grant professional development, grant training. That's double, more than double what we had previously spent of the 70,000. And so I expect that grant budget to grow, and then as we disperse funds, that will show up on the regional lines. For the cash flow. In April, the foundation netted 280,000. That's represented from almost 400,000 in interest. And a net cost of 119,000 in operating expenditures. That net includes interest we earn in that account, which is 10,000. So our total disbursements in April were 129,000. Are there any questions? I think we voted. We already did those. Huh? Yeah. Any questions? Comments? I think we vote on this. Yeah.
We're looking for, go ahead, motions made by Robert Radcliffe to approve financials. Second to the motion
Second.
by Jeanette Wisbicki. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and the motion carries. Now, just lastly, we have some volunteers that have been submitted to Alicia, people who want to serve on the investment committee from outside of our group. This is excellent timing because in July, once we do our retreat, we'll be able to establish for what our life cycle might be, and that will help us then in determining what the investment life cycle should be. Because again, it's important, whenever you sit down with financial advisors, the first thing they always say is basically, when do you need the money? And that strategic planning will help us identify the cycle that will be needing the money. So again, I appreciate the update. And we've already passed the motion for the unaudited financials. Is there anything else come before the committee? Hearing none, is there then a motion to adjourn? By Judge Mattia. Second by Tom Gregoire. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and the motion carries.